Today, we'll be creating patterns in Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to show you 6 methods to create patterns, and we're also going to look at some general tips and tricks that will help us with any project in Illustrator. So for this video, you're going to follow along, and you're going to create one pattern for each method and submit your file on Canvas. So get on your best pattern sweater, and let's jump into it. The first step is to set up our file. So let's open up Adobe Illustrator and create a new file. I'm going to change the name to AI Pattern Lesson, and then you can put your last name at the end. We want the size to be 8.5 by 11 landscape. Let's have the artboard set to 5, our color mode RGB, and then click Create. Now we have a file with 5 artboards. The next thing we want to do is label our artboards. We want a label on each artboard to tell us what pattern we're going to put there. So let me go to my first artboard, and then I'm going to create a second layer. I'm going to name this top layer label, and then I'm going to name this bottom layer art. And so I'll have my patterns on this art layer. I'm going to have my text on the label layer. So having this top layer selected, I'm going to use the type tool, and I'm going to call this first one repeat pattern. I'm going to use my character panel. I'm going to select a typeface. Feel free to select any typeface you like. Bump up the size a bit. Let's position it up in the top left corner. That looks pretty good. Now the next thing we want to do is add this label to all of our other artboards, which we could do by copying, pasting, and trying to manually align everything or put them in the same position. But there's a much easier way to do that. So I'm going to select this piece of text. I'm going to go up to Edit and Copy, and then I'm going to go to Edit, and you see this option to paste on all artboards. Now, Adobe Illustrator has put that piece of text, and this will do it with any object, in the same exact position on every artboard. The one thing you have to be mindful of is it's actually put it back onto that same artboard. So there's a duplicate there that we want to get rid of. So we have our first one labeled repeat pattern. We're going to go to our second artboard, and we're going to label this radial pattern. Our third artboard is going to be grid pattern. Our fourth will be mirror. Our fifth will be brush. And we actually need one more artboard. So we're going to go up to artboards, and we're going to have this last artboard selected, come up to the menu, and click duplicate artboard. Now we have our missing artboard, and we're going to label this last one seamless pattern. And it'd be nice if this was all in a nice grid, so I'm going to rearrange my artboards, set it to 3, and now everything is nicely together on my workspace. So we have 6 artboards, each of them labeled. And just to keep things clear, let's go to this layer, and we're going to lock it, and then select our art layer. So now, whenever we're making our patterns, we know we're not going to adjust these pieces of text at all. So now we're ready to begin. We're going to create is called a repeat pattern. Let's start by making a line, a circle, and a square. I'm going to set my stroke color to black. I'm going to draw a line. Then we're going to do a circle. And finally we'll do a square. And let's make this square filled in black. Now, a repeat pattern is very simple. We're just going to take a shape or an object, and we're just going to repeat it. Now again, I could try to copy and paste this and use the alignment tool, or manually try to put everything into a nice position. But again, Illustrator has a nice and easy way of doing this. So I'm going to select this stroke, and I'm going to click and hold, and you'll see that I can move the object around. But now if I hold down on a Mac Option Command, or if you're on Windows, that's Alt Control, you'll see how it's created a duplicate of that object. And now it's free floating, but if I hold down the Shift key, now it's locked it into a position. And so I can now set that object where I want it. But now a further technique to make this easier is, instead of trying to now use that key command to move things everywhere I want them to be, maybe use the alignment tool to clean them up, I can do what's called transform again. So if I go up to Object and Transform, you'll see this option for transform again. On a Mac, it's Command D. Now, as long as I have that object selected, if I hit transform again, you'll see it has remembered the movement we made with the first object, and it does the exact same movement again. And so I can keep hitting that command to transform again, and it will keep moving it at a consistent space. And we can do this with some complexity too. So if we make this stroke, perhaps we'll make a second one, and we'll make it a little smaller and thicker. If I select two objects, again, I'm going to click and drag, and then I'm going to use my key command of Option Command Shift or Alt Control Shift, place them where I want. Having both of these selected, I'm going to do transform again. Again, that's Object Transform again, or you can use the key command. And so no matter how many objects I have selected, it's remembering what I did last time and will just replicate that. So that's a very easy way to make a repeat pattern. So we can do this with the circle as well. So again, I'm going to select it, hold down my key command, and we can even let this overlap a bit. Transform again, and now I have another pattern. Maybe I think the circles are a little too far apart, or I want them a little closer. I'm going to take this last circle, I'm going to move it in, select all of the circles. I'm going to use my alignment tool to distribute the objects horizontally. And now everything is nice and even. And finally, let's do it with a square. Let's create a second square. I'm going to drag it. Let's make this a little smaller. Now let's select both of them, copy them over again, and then Command D. So that's how do you make a repeat pattern in Adobe Illustrator. On our second artboard, we're going to create a radial pattern. So let's start by making a circle. And then over here, we'll create a second one, and we'll make it a little more complex. Let's have a circle, and then maybe we'll have a square inside. I'm going to select both of these, and I want to align them. Now you'll see if I just hit the alignment tool, it moves both of them to the common center point. But I actually like the circle where it is, and I want to move the square to the circle. So in order to do that, having both objects selected, I'm going to click the circle, and you'll see this thicker blue line has come around it, meaning it's now selected. So now when I go to the alignment tool and align center vertically and horizontally, it's moving the square to the position of the circle. The circle does not move. So it's a helpful way if you need to distribute things according to one object. With all those objects selected, you just click the object you want. And let's thicken up this square, and we'll thicken up this circle. And even in my stroke panel, if you see down here profile, I'm going to change the profile here. So I'm just going to select this first one, and you'll see that this profile has a tapering edge to the stroke. Feel free to play around with whichever profile you like. And you know, I think this square is actually a little too sharp, so I'm going to select the square, and you'll see that these little circles have appeared in the corners. These circles will allow us to round the corners. So all I have to do is click and drag, and you'll see it's actually moving all of them. If I want to move just one of those corners, I can go to the Transform panel, and there are some options down here, or I can just click and click again, and now I'm allowed to move one of these corners independent of the others. Now let's make a radial pattern. So I'm going to select this circle. I'm going to go up to Object. I'm going to go to Repeat and Radial. And you'll see it's automatically put this into a radial pattern. And this is a newer feature in Illustrator which gives us a lot of flexibility and customizability with this object. So you'll see these different commands and controls we have. If I use this circle slider over here on the side, sliding it up will increase the number of instances or the number of shapes. So from one, or I can go up to a whole lot of complexity. And then this one in the middle will actually tell it where to begin and end. So maybe I just want a half circle or 3/4. I'm going to keep it as a full. And then this circle at the top will allow me to change the position of things. So if I click and drag this, you can see the effects it has on the shape. And so you can play around with these options to create a pattern that you like. And now the features of the actual shape have been maintained. So if I click, double click, see how it's selected one of the circles? I'm going to go to my stroke pattern. I'm going to up the stroke to 4. And now you see it's changed it on all of them. So it's nice that we have this flexibility. So now let's do this on our more complex shape. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to hit Object, Repeat, and Radial. And so you see that we can have multiple shapes and multiple objects, and we can start to use that to add even more complexity to an object. So again, play around with these however you like and with whichever shapes you would like, and just see what you can do with this. So I might even have it do something like that, or move it out a little more. So that's a radial pattern, the grid pattern. So again, let's make a shape. Let's do a circle, and let's put a little X in the middle of it. Actually, to make sure that these lines are both the same, I'm going to select this line. I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to just use my rotate tool right here, rotate it. And then I want to align things to the circle again. So select all of them. I'm going to click the circle. Then I'm going to use my alignment tool to put everything in the middle. If I want to make that X a little smaller, I can select it and do so. Maybe I want to put a round on the cap and increase the stroke a bit. And maybe let's make this circle a dotted line. So I'm going to come over to my stroke panel, hit dashed line. And now you can see I can adjust the size of the dashes. I can even adjust the size of the gap if I want. I'm going to leave it at 14, and I'm also going to hit round, and you'll see it's rounded the ends of these dashes. So now we have an object, and let's make it a little smaller, or at least I'm going to make mine a little smaller. We're going to go back up to Object. We're going to go to Repeat and Grid. And now it has done all the work for us that perhaps a repeat pattern would do. It's put everything on a nice grid for us. And you'll see that as by default it will do something like this, but you can actually, by selecting this, clicking and dragging, you can make that pattern as big as you want. And you'll see we have some various sliders again. So by sliding that, I can bring things closer together, or I can spread them out. This one will do the same on the vertical. So this makes customizability very easy. Where we might have had to manually move things and keep using the alignment tool, this is a great way to just do this very quickly. And it's a whole bounding box, so if I were to come to the corner, I can change the size of it very easy if I want things to be smaller or bigger. And again, the lines have been maintained, so if we double click in here, we can change some of these settings if we feel it's too thick or too thin, or we want to change the color, whatever we want to do. So that's a grid pattern. So again, let's make an object. I'm going to make a polygon this time. I'm going to click, and I'm going to keep those sides at 6. I'm going to make it solid. And now I'm going to go back up to Object, to Repeat, and hit Mirror. And so now you can see it's mirroring it across this line. And so by adjusting this line, I can adjust the space between them, or I can change the angle. I can even start to bring it back on itself. I can even start to combine the objects. I'm going to leave them side by side. You'll notice, and it's somewhat annoying, that holding Shift here doesn't seem to do too much, though it is doing a little bit on this one. On some of these newer techniques, for some reason Adobe doesn't let you be too precise. Maybe that will change in the future, but I'm going to set it about here. Now again, the customizability has been preserved, so I can go back and I can change the thickness. I can even duplicate something. So again, using the technique we used for the repeat pattern, I'm going to select this, hold down my key command, and I can actually make another object. I'm going to make a third one up here. If I select all three of these, I can get them to be aligned nicely. Maybe I just want these two to align to each other, double check that. And so everything I'm doing, it is mirroring over here. So again, this is a very useful way that you could create something of a pattern by using the mirror pattern. So again, we're going to use objects, and then we're going to turn them into brushes. So let's start with a line. So for this line, I'm going to make it a little smaller. Let's do something a little interesting. I'm going to do a round cap. I have my weight set to 5. Let's use one of these profiles. I'm going to use this preset width profile number 2. I'm actually going to increase the weight a little more. So now we have this line. Next, if you don't already have the brush panel, come up to Window and click Brushes. And this opens up the brush panel. So what we can do now is, with this line segment selected, we just click and drag and hover over the brush panel. We see the little green plus, and we can add this to our brush. Select Pattern Brush, click OK, and now it's showing me how this will look in different angles and at corners as a whole pattern. Let's change the line to the title to Brush Pattern 1, or whatever you'd like to call it. Now let's change the method to Tint, and that should be good. Let's click OK. And so now, if we were to make a line segment, have it selected, and I'm just going to click this brush. Now it's applying this onto this line segment. I could do the same with a circle or a square or any object. I'm going to draw my circle out, select this brush, and it's applied it here. And by increasing or decreasing the weight, you can see how it changes the size. So let's do the same process, but with a shape. Now let's start with circles. So I'm going to create a circle. Let's try to keep it actually a little smaller. I'm going to go up to 4 width. I'm going to make another circle inside. Again, an easy way to do this with my smart guides, I can quickly see where the center is, put my cursor there, and when I draw out my circle, I'm going to hold down Option and Shift, and so now it's putting it right in the center. I'm going to make that solid. I want to put another circle in there, so let's also select that and do Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste in Place. And let's even throw another technique in there. Let's use the Scale tool. I'm going to come down to 50, change this to white. I'm going to show you one more thing. Let me change this to blue. I'm going to select this blue circle and this black circle. And we're going to use the Pathfinder tool again. But this time we're going to use the Exclude tool right here. So if I click that, you'll see it's actually cut out the one shape, and now I actually have a hole in the middle of this circle. I'm just going to change it to black for our pattern. But you can see there's a lot of different useful cases for these different modes in Pathfinder. Great, so now let's turn this into a brush. So let's select it. We're going to do the same thing of click and drag it in. We're going to select pattern brush, click OK. I'm going to call this pattern brush 2. And let's do method tints again and click OK. So now if I were to take this circle and this line and move them down here and apply this new pattern, you can see how it's working in these cases. And again, if I were to decrease the weight of this stroke, you'll see how it changes that size of that object. So that's a brush pattern. We're going to create is a seamless pattern. Now, this is probably the most complicated, so we want to pay careful attention to what we're doing. It's complicated, but that's because it allows us a level of complexity that also makes it very interesting. First thing we're going to do is create a 4" by 4" box. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool. I'm going to click and to put in my dimensions 4 by 4. Now I have my increments set to inches. If for some reason yours is set to points or picas and you're not seeing inch here, you can still put in 4IN, and even if your document is using points, it will do the conversion automatically for you. So I have it 4 by 4, click OK. Let's make sure we put a stroke on this to make it easier to see. Now what we want to do with a seamless pattern is arrange our shapes or even our typography, whatever we're using, in such a way around this box that when we duplicate this box and put it together, no matter what direction it's in, it's seamlessly flowing from one to the other. And if we do it really well, we will hardly even be able to tell where that seam is. So the first thing we're going to do is work on this edge. And once we've worked on the left edge, it will help us with the right edge. So I'm going to create some shapes. Up here I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to have it offset a little bit. I'm going to up the stroke. Next thing I want is a square here. And a little tip here, if I go up to view, make sure that Smart Guides is selected. You'll see if I drag my cursor onto the edge, it's saying path there, and even if I come center with the box, it says intersect. I'm going to perfectly align a square with this edge. So if I were to just drag, you'll see it's dragging from a corner outward. But if I hold down Option on a Mac, or that's either Alt or Control on a window, you'll see it's moving it from the center, which is very useful. So now I have that square perfectly on the line. I'm also going to make it a fill. And then down here, I'm going to add a triangle. In this one, I want to match the stroke of the circle. So I'm going to have my triangle selected. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, hover over this circle and click. And you'll see it's matched the properties of that circle. Now, because we want this to be seamless, we want this arrangement of objects to perfectly match on this right side. So the way we're going to do that is select these 3 objects, and we're going to come over to our transform panel, and in the X value, we're going to put +4. We're doing +4 because we know our box is 4 inches, so we want this to move 4 inches from its current position. So +4, enter, and it's moved those objects perfectly to where we want them. The only problem is we've lost our original. So let's undo, or Command Z, bring those back. What we need to do is make a duplicate. So what we're going to do is do Edit, we're going to do Copy, and then we're going to go Edit and Paste in place. So this is actually pasted a duplicate right over top the original. Command Z to move this back there. So now I have this duplicate set selected. Come over to my transform panel, into the X value, put +4, click enter, and now it has perfectly moved those objects where I want them. So now our left and our right side should be good. Let's work on the top, and that will help us with the bottom. I'm going to use a square again. I'm just going to select this one and drag it over. I want to turn it onto its side, make it bigger, and I'm going to have it about here. So now, again, I want to move it down to here. And I could come over to my transform panel, but I'm going to show you another way, which is I'm going to go to my selection tool here, and if I double click this tool, you'll see it opens up this move options box. And so from here, I can move it horizontally, vertically, on an angle, any way I want. I'm going to set the horizontal to 0 to tell it to move 0 inches on the horizontal, essentially stay where you are. On the vertical, I'm going to put 4. And so now it knows to move it 4 inches. And because I have the angle to -90, it's moving it down. If I were to click OK, it would just move the original. But this gives me the option to click copy. And so now it's made a duplicate exactly where I wanted it. So that's another way that you can move things. It's running into this triangle a bit, so I want to adjust things. And if I'm going to make any adjustments, I just need to make sure I select the copy of it as well while I try to move things. Maybe even this square is a little too big, and I want to use the scale tool. So I could try to do this manually like this, and hopefully I would be able to match things, especially with smart guides, but sometimes it's a little tricky. So I'm going to come back to this just to show you a new way that you can scale things, which is with an object selected. If you click S, you'll see it's highlighted this scale tool. Now, or you could just come over here and click it. So I'm going to double click this, and it's opened up the scale options box. And so here, it allows me to change the scale as I want. And because I have preview, I can see what it's doing. So let's do 80%. Click enter. Now it's shrunk that down for me. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to click S, and I can even just click enter, or I can double click here. And it actually remembers the last measurement I did, which makes it very easy. And so I'm going to click OK. So now I think I have things where I want them. A special note if you want to do something in a corner. If you want to do something in a corner, let's say I want to do this circle in a corner, you have to be mindful of doing the same thing on every corner. So I'll have to move this circle onto every corner for things to match up. And again, Smart Guides is helping me there to make sure things are aligned. Now it's running into these objects, so I'm going to select all of them and can move them where I want them. Great, so now we have our edges sorted out. The next thing we want to do is remove all of this on the outside, but we want to keep everything on the inside. First thing we're going to do is take this box we made and remove it to the front. We can do that by going to Object, Arrange, and Bring to Front. Or you could see the key command there. And just to show you, I'm going to change it to blue. So originally it was behind everything, and now it's in front. Next thing we want to do is group all of our shapes, but we don't want to group the box. So what we're going to do is I'm going to even select this box. That's in my selection. Now I'm going to hold down Shift. So with Shift held down, I just drag, and I've selected all of the objects. But you'll see I don't have the blue box selected, because when I was holding down Shift, it was telling it to reverse the selection. So again, another way I could even do this is if I just selected everything, you'll see now everything is selected. But if I hold down Shift and I click this box, it's no longer selected. So that's an easy way if you need to unselect or reselect things. You hold down Shift and you can make multiple clicks. So good, we have all of our shapes selected. Let's go up to Object and Group. Now these are all one group. So any adjustments I make, even if I make color adjustments or stroke adjustments, will be applied to all of them because they're all a group. So now what we need to do is use our box to cut off the edges. We're going to do that with the Pathfinder tool. So if I have both my group and my blue box here selected, we're going to use this option called crop, and if you hover over, it'll tell you the title of what the option is. Now if I were just to hit crop, you'll see it's done it to these shapes, but I've lost all of my stroked shapes. So it doesn't work with strokes. So the workaround we need to do is with this group of objects selected, I'm going to go up to Object and Expand. I want to make sure I have Fill and Stroke both clicked. If I click OK, you'll see that it has actually turned those strokes into solid objects, so they're no longer strokes. Even if I come over to my stroke panel, there's nothing happening there because this is a solid object now. So now, again, if I select this group of objects and this box, go to Pathfinder and hit Crop. Now it cuts everything out from the outside, leaves everything on the inside. And now I'm free to do whatever I might like to do on the inside. And this one can be a stroke because I'm not worried about it having to use the Pathfinder tool. And I can add in here whatever kind of objects or additional things that I want to add. And let's select all of this, and again, let's group it so it's all one thing. If I've done everything correctly, when I duplicate this shape, this box, and bring it together, things should fit together seamlessly. Looks good on the side. Let's do it from the bottom. And so there we go. Now we have a seamless pattern. Excellent work. So now we have 6 methods for creating patterns in Adobe Illustrator. So you'll create one pattern for each method and submit your file on Canvas. If you have any questions, always feel free to let me know.